My two favorite genus of plants are anthuriums and philodendrons. I recently did a video showcasing all of my anthuriums, and today we're going to be talking philodendron. And we're going to start it off right here with probably the pinnacle of my plant collection. This right here is, or was, one of the rarest plants in the plant collecting hobby. This is the Philodendron Spiritus Sancti. Now, the reason why this plant was super rare, super desirable, was at one point it was claimed that there were only about 8 of these plants left in the wild, and they grow in a very specific area in Brazil, hence its name, Spiritus Sancti. I believe that the town or the area that this plant grows in is called Spiritus Sancti, something along those lines. This plant was the hardest thing to get your hands on, but in the past year or so, its popularity has exploded, which means that it's a lot more readily available for the houseplant collecting hobby. I managed to get my hands on this lovely specimen about a year ago or something like that, and it was a very small cut-in. I've documented my whole journey with this plant, from taking it from an absolutely tiny baby to propagating it, having great success, and now we are where we are. I will be doing a follow-up, giving you a real in-depth look at this plant and give you a real proper update as to what's happened with this one, the other cut-in, and so on. So stay tuned for that. Despite this thing being extremely rare at one point and super expensive, I found that it's actually quite easy to look after. It's very much along the lines of a billieti, because of these leathery leaves. I don't find that this plant needs particularly high humidity. It doesn't need any special soil. I've just sort of thrown some soil together for this plant. It's got lots of chunky bits in here for some really good drainage. And yeah, it's just been an absolute trooper. I will admit that the growth of this plant has slowed down quite a lot over the winter. In fact, I don't think I've had any new growth from this plant in that time. The only thing I can sort of point you to is just at the base of the plant where my ring finger is. Where is it? Just here. That little yellowy kind of dot is a new root that's emerging. So that's the only sign of new growth I can see on this plant. There is no signs of any new leaves coming in. This right here is the latest leaf, and I can't see anything coming in. There are two plants effectively here. There's sort of the main chunk, which is just here, and we have this one that's grown as an offshoot from where I did the propagation. So there's just some of the updates. I'm going to wait until I do a full in-depth video. I'm going to show you from the start to where we are now. I'm going to give you a real detailed breakdown of this plant, how I've cared for it, and how I've had to adapt my care for this plant over the winter months. So stay tuned for that. Let me know if you do want to see something like that coming up soon, and I will make sure that I do that in the next couple of weeks. But the Spiritus Sancti, an absolute gem, a real prize in my collection, and just, yeah, a real strong trooper. I've got some plans for it in the near future, but that will remain to be seen. This is my Philodendron Rugosum, and it is something special. And the reason for that is, look at that texture on these leaves. Just something so unique, so different. It's got a, how can I explain this? I don't know if you've ever seen sort of a textured leather kind of material. You often find it in sort of cheaper cars where the dashboard has those sort of bumpy, rough sort of texture. That reminds me exactly of that. It's really just interesting, and just a different, unique kind of philodendron in terms of the leaf shape and structure. I've only had this plant in my collection for maybe about a year or so, and I'm still getting to grips with it. In that time, I believe I've only had this leaf come in, and I think it's lost a leaf as well. You can see that it's kind of growing a bit funny. It's misshapen slightly, and that's just because when I had this plant quarantining, just because it was a new plant, I sort of left it in the bag and it was sort of you know, hanging over, so it sort of changed its position just to sort of make the most of that light. But now that I have it staked up, I'm hoping I can then train this to go straight up as intended. But a really easy plant again for me. I haven't had any issues with it. Even the quarantining was an absolute breeze. I believe that it's well rooted. I've put it, you know, when I first got it, it was in moss. I've transferred it over to soil, and it seems to be doing a-okay. And I can yeah, do a full report on this when I'm more comfortable with it and I really understand its growth pattern, what it likes, what it doesn't. But so far it seems to be a piece of cake to sort of care for. So this is the Rugosum. I've spoken about this plant a couple of times in the past few months, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is my Philodendron Silver Sword, and all of the pond is falling out of it. But yeah, this is another easy plant to grow. I would even argue to say that it's probably the easiest the easiest philodendron to grow in my collection. And for the very first time, you can see here just at the top, we have right here an inflorescence growing in. This is my very first inflorescence on a philodendron ever. So this is quite cool, quite interesting. And despite the plant putting loads of energy in growing this inflorescence, it's also putting out a new leaf. So this plant is just, it's a real trooper. It's almost bulletproof. It's really pest resistant as well. So when my other philodendron may be getting hit with spider mites, this one just sort of, yeah, they just bounce off of it. And I think it's probably just impenetrable or something. I'm not quite sure. Another easy philodendron to care for is this one. My only issue with this plant is that I'm not quite sure what it is. I know it's a philodendron, but I'm not sure exactly what it is. I've got it written down as a Giganteum, but I've seen other Giganteums and this doesn't look like a Giganteum. I know I've seen what these plants can be and they grow to absolute gigantic sizes. And I think that's why I said this plant is a Giganteum, but I'm not quite sure. So for those of you out there with all of the philodendron knowledge, do let me know what you think this plant is. But for now, we'll just refer to it as a Giganteum because that's how I've been caring for it. Although this plant is easy to care for, a lot like the Silver Sword, it is a spider mite magnet. Honestly, spider mites love this thing. And despite this plant being hit with spider mites on several occasions, it doesn't seem to affect it. Like the leaves might go a little, you know, yellowy, a bit stripy, as you can see here. You can see some previous damage, but never enough to kill this plant. It's just yeah, it can take on a lot and not die, which is good. So if you're somebody where you know you have regular occurrence of spider mites and other pests, and you need a plant that can actually stand up to those, then this is a good plant for you. Its growth pattern is quite interesting. It's definitely a sprawler. If it could grow like this, that would be great. I do prefer my plants to grow a bit more compact. For now, it's been growing absolutely fine, absolutely fine. This plant is growing in pond, as you can see. However, I've changed my approach with this one where I had it sat in water, just a little reservoir of water all of the time. It was absolutely fine. It didn't mind. I've changed my approach by treating this as a soil-based plant. So I don't leave any water in there. I'll sort of take it to the sink. I'll give it a good soak, let the water drain out a bit, give it a little shake, and I'll stick it back on the windowsill. And it just seems to not really care what I do, what sort of substrate is growing in. It's just going to keep doing what it's going to keep doing. So for now, we're going to refer to this as the Philodendron Giganteum until someone corrects me. This little beauty over here is my Philodendron White Princess. I, in fact, had two separate plants that I got from a plant swap event, and I put them both into one pot just because why not? Look how nice and bushy that is. That is absolutely gorgeous. This plant again is a relatively easy plant to care for. I haven't had any issues growing this plant. It's been simply a gem to grow. Honestly, there's not really much I can say about this plant. I haven't had any issues with this. This one actually sits next to the Giganteum on the windowsill, and for a long time when the Giganteum will come down with spider mites, I wouldn't have any issues with this. They seem to not really like this one, or they just seem to prefer the Giganteum. So I haven't really had any issues with this that I've had to sort of battle or had any issues with over or under watering. It's just it's just another easy philodendron to grow. And I think there's a pattern here. If I had to compare philodendron to anthuriums, they're definitely the easier ones to grow, especially these leathery kind of leaf ones. What I really like about this plant is just that variegation, that white variegation. Have a look at that. Wow, that is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Obviously some leaves have less variegation than others, but I think we're going to have a nice balance here. This plant, again, I believe it's another grower. However, at the moment, it doesn't seem to need or want a stake. It seems to be doing just okay, sprawling out like this, and I'm okay with that for now. Space is at a premium here, so the longer my plants can stay compact for, the better. The Philodendron White Princess. Here we have a Philodendron Painted Lady. What a name, right? What a name. This plant, again, I got in another swap, another plant swap event. And although it's been okay, I've had it for maybe 2 years, close to 2 years. It hasn't done much in the way of growing. I've probably only had about 2 leaves. This is the latest leaf to come out, and look at it. It's small, it's misshapen. Is just a bit weird. I had this thing growing in a humidity bag, just a plastic bag, for the longest time, and nothing really happened. It was growing in moss, and recently, I say recently, maybe the past couple of months, I switched it over into this is 100% cocoa fiber, and since then it's put out this leaf. So maybe just that transition was a bit hard on the plant, but again, it's pushing out a new leaf, and this is doing more growing now than it did in the humidity bag, which you would think is a better environment for these plants. But hey ho, you live and you learn. But although I've had this plant for so long, I don't think I have enough experience with it, like growing out in the open, in the wild, as much as it is in my home. I think it's just a bit too early days to sort of give you a conclusive evidence on whether or not this plant is easy or not. But yeah, it's still a really interesting one. It's a sort of a lime green, very light, with those sort of streaks of pink every now and then, especially on the edge. Look at that, on the edge of the plants, and that little line here is looking fab. I think I'm gonna have to put it on a stake as well, actually, because it's starting to sort of lean over when I know it wants to climb. So the Philodendron Painted Lady. It's not all fun and games though. This is my Philodendron 69686. What a name. How what a name, right? This plant was doing great. It had grown quite large. It had quite a number of leaves, and then all of a sudden during the winter I started to lose them, and I'm down to just this one. If you look here though, on the stem just at the bottom there, you can actually see that there are several growth points. I believe all of them are sort of new leaves that are going to be growing out. There's even one just near the base of the plant just there. So hopefully this isn't the end for the plant. What I did that was different was I took this plant from upstairs, where I have some of my plants that live there, and it's a bit cooler because it's a spare room. The heating isn't on in there. It's just, it's a bit more of a harsher environment. I've now brought this plant, when I saw that it was declining, and then the pace that it was declining at, I brought it into my room where, of course, I'm in there. It's warmer, humidity slightly higher just because of, you know, being in there, breathing and so on. And it's since stopped losing leaves. You can even see that this leaf was on its way out. It's got a little bit of a cut there, but it's holding on, it's hanging in there. I think, fingers crossed, this plant will be okay. I have had this plant before, so hopefully second time's a charm here, and I can sort of revive this and continue growing it, and really grow this thing into the beast that it can be. It's a really fast grower when it's enjoying its environment, grows really well, about a leaf a month. If you're lucky, maybe a couple of leaves a month. But I think just the colder months are always when I've seemed to struggle with this plant. It's exactly what happened last year, and almost happened again this year. So I'm hoping just to keep this plant happy and alive, and get some real nice growth out of it over the spring and summer months. How interesting are these leaves? Look at that. This is my Philodendron Florida Ghost. Definitely one of the more famous or well-known plants. I remember when this thing was all the rage. Everyone loved that sort of white leaf when it came in, and seeing how it's then transitions back into that sort of that deep green is something that I can definitely get behind. I've always had an eye for this plant, but I've never owned one. I managed to get my hands on one at a plant swap event, and yeah, really enjoying it. I got it at the same time as this Philodendron 69686. And although that one has struggled somewhat, this one hasn't. And it was also in the same room that I spoke about. And although there were no issues, it's an old leaf, so that's perfectly fine that it's falling off now. Although it was a colder room and there were no issues with this one, I decided to bring it into my room. It can have a bit more warmth and a bit more of a chance to sort of really start to thrive. So that tells you that it's a relatively easy plant to grow, and I'm sure as it gets bigger and more mature, the care is going to be also easier as well. I find for anthuriums that the bigger they are, the more likely they are to be resilient to pests and weather changes and so on. So yeah, one I'm looking forward to growing, the Philodendron Florida Ghost. This is what's left of my attempt to save my Philodendron Pastazanum and my Philodendron Plowmanii. The Plowmanii is down to one leaf. It's lost every other leaf, and the Pastazanum, yeah, we're down to that, just a stem. However, I would say on the Pastazanum, we have a couple of would-be growth points that are starting to wake up a little bit. There's another one over here. So we have 2 growth points, as well as the main growth point is also showing some signs of growth. But to take you back on why this plant is suffering so much, this plant was in leca for a long time, and it was fine. I had no issues in terms of growing it in leca and having it in sort of a reservoir and so on. The issue I had with this plant was that it kept coming down with spider mites, and every time it would come down really hard and start to lose leaves. And even when it didn't lose any leaves, the leaves would be like completely yellow and just unsightly. So I thought, okay, let's try to do a hard reset on this plant. I took it out of leca and I put it in soil. This is soil just with a leca topping, and I cut off as many of the leaves that were really bad, and I just left some really good ones, or the ones that looked the best. And even then, the plant just sort of continued to sort of decline. I imagine that's just because of the change of environment. I think it has settled now, although I've lost all of the leaves on here. As I did show you, we've got some buds that are showing signs of opening up, so that's showing that we're going in the right direction. And with the Plowmanii over here, you can see that we still have a leaf looking really good. And although there are no other growth points that are showing signs of growth or activation, both of them do have their growth points still, and they're both looking solid and healthy. So I think there's still hope for this. There's still hope for this still. So yeah, this is where we are with this. Go check out my other video where I actually did that hard reset on this plant. That'll give you a bit more of an understanding of the background of this plant. You've got some other miscellaneous philodendron like this one. Again, I've forgotten the name of this one. I think I've lost the tag for it. If you do know, let me know what that is in the comments below. But yeah, these are the sort of the smaller ones that I'm just trying to grow out quite quickly. So I've got them, you know, near the east facing window, trying to get a lot of that light in. So hopefully these will grow up quite quickly. This one actually I noticed today has a new growth point coming in, so that is exciting. Let's see where we go with this one. I had a larger Philodendron Gloriosum sort of approaching these sort of sizes, similar to the Plowmanii and the Pastazanum. It then started to decline, so I did chop it up. So we have what's left of the Gloriosum, which is this one, which was doing the best but has now sort of gone backwards. However, we still have that growth point over here, so hopefully that takes off. But we have some others in this baggie over here trying to sort of root up, but no signs of growth. Although this one, there is a sign of growth just here. Whether or not that will continue, that remains to be seen. I forgot what this, I think this might be a McDowell actually. So I got this at the another plant swap event, and I believe that it's a McDowell. And it seems to be doing okay. It seems to be doing okay. We have 3 leaves, and I believe a couple of those, especially this one, are new leaves. So hopefully this year is its year, and it really takes off. It really starts to explode in growth. Back here in this home jungle, we have this monster, this beast of a philodendron. Let me show you the sort of the scale of this plant. So hopefully this sort of gives you an idea. Now this plant is well over a meter tall, so probably approaching maybe 1.5 meters, maybe 1.3 meters, something like that. An absolute beast of a plant. I actually got this plant at the same time as this one, which is what I believe to be the Giganteum. Got this at the same time, at the same size also. But look at it now. It is an absolute beast. It has outgrown every single plant in my collection. It is by far the fastest growing plant. And although it's taken a little pause, We'll move the King Anthurium out of the way. Although it's taking a little pause over the winter, look at that. We have two growth points, and I'm sure there was another one that I saw, but I can't seem to see it now. But 2 growth points, which means that this thing is only getting ready to just explode in growth again. And look in here, lots and lots of roots coming in as well. So we have 1 root here, and I can see another one back there as well. So this plant is just gearing up, to really take over this space. This one right here is my Philodendron Pink Princess. It's not looking very pink, it's not looking very royal. it's just here. It's growing very quickly. You can see it's actually quite a long plant, so it's growing quite well. However, it's just not that exciting, is it? I think the hype has died down, and the only pink I have on this plant is right here. That's it. That's everything. Really disappointed, really disappointing, but just want to have and see how it goes. I may not be keeping this one long term. We will see. Oh my days, I completely forgot about this OG philodendron. This is my Philodendron Imperial Red. I can't believe I forgot about it. I was literally in the middle of editing and I realized that I haven't spoken about it, and it's there, it's staring me in the face. I'm looking at it in the video and I'm like, how could I forget? This plant is just an OG. I've got this plant when it was quite large. It was already quite established, but since then we've been through some stuff together. This plant, I actually am growing it in leca. I think it was one of the first philodendron I actually grew in leca, and it has been in leca for a very long time. At the moment, I'm not keeping a reservoir in here. I might start doing that during the summer, or if I need to go away for a little while. But for now, it's just been growing in here. I treat it as a regular soil. I don't really do much. It's quite far away. At the moment, it's quite dark, but it's quite far away from an east-facing window, yet still it lives off of primarily the supplementary light, these grow lights over here, and that's what it lives off of, and that seems to be doing okay for it. Yes, I would say that some of the newer leaves up top are slightly smaller than some of these older ones. Check out this one. This one is absolutely massive, but nonetheless the plant is still doing okay. It's still consistently putting up new growth, and we have one just here, so that's a new growth coming in. Honestly, a real easy plant to grow, really easy. Definitely one for the collection if you're looking for something that is low light tolerant and again quite resilient. The only one time I had an issue with this plant was this leaf. This leaf was stunted, but the reason for that is because it's the leaf that came out after the plant was moved into leca, and since then it's been fine, perfectly fine. So there you have it. That is my entire philodendron collection. We started big with this one, my Spiritus Sancti, but I hope you can see that throughout this journey there are a whole range and variety of plants that I'm into. What sort of catches my eyes with plants are just how different they are, if they're unique or not, textures, sizes, shapes. Those are the kind of things that I can get behind. If you have been following my journey for a long time, you would have noticed that there are some plants that are missing. For example, the Philodendron billeti, which was growing fantastically, then all of a sudden just sort of completely died back. The Hesperocraspidon, that took a hit and that's gone as well. That didn't make it through the winter. And also the Patriciae as well. So that didn't make it either. So we have lost a few, but although we may have lost the battle, I think we have still won the war. But we're still fighting every day to keep these plants alive, learn more about them, and just keep enjoying the hobby. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep planting.